Hello, David here. Started watching Joe Rogan and I got annoyed immediately. This guy, Lex Fridman, I don't know who the guy is. But why do these people that don't have any medical experience preaching? I mean, I'm not saying he's wrong on what he's talking about as far as the mask. I started making a comment here because it's just getting really frustrated. So let me read my comment instead of posting. I'll just make a YouTube video instead of posting my comment. First of all, I worked as a respiratory therapist for 20 years. Masks are not going to stop you from getting this virus. To me, probably masks are only going to help about 20%. And let me tell you why masks aren't going to do that much. Your hands is what's really spreading the virus. So like for example, most people don't know how all this stuff works. And anytime a virus attacks your body, or anything, bacteria, virus, or even allergies, an allergen. Let's say an allergen, you have an immune response to your body, right? So once you have this immune response, we have this thing called inflammation, right? Now what does inflammation do? Inflammation causes tissues to swell, because that's your body response to anything that's a foreign invader. And the reason that the inflammation happens is so that when stuff becomes inflamed, then white blood cells can cross from the inflamed area into other areas. So that inflammation response is so that white blood cells can cross. And then the second response is your body to try to wash away the offending virus. So, when your nose is running, that's what your body's trying to wash it away. And where's your body trying to wash the virus to? It's trying to wash it down and where you swallow it. But what happens is when you sleep, as your body is trying to wash this stuff away, wash this virus away, and white blood cells are trying to cross the barrier from the inflammation to get where they can do something. Unfortunately, that you sleep and then you're draining, and then that stuff drains down your chest, and it ends up in your lungs where you don't want it. So basically, that's how it gets down in the lungs, because your nose. Most people don't know that your nose is like a filter, right? It traps it. It's most people that haven't studied medicine, they don't know that your nose is a filter. It's your first line of defense. And if you're a mouth breather, you're not. It's not going to be stopped in your nose. You're going to breathe it in down in your lungs. And I'm coughing from allergies because in Ohio right now the blossoms are exploding on the trees. It's very pretty, but it's allergy season. It's affecting me just a little bit. I suffer just very mildly with allergies. But so this is the mode of transmission. Your virus is multiplying once it gets in your oral or nasal pharynx, and then you have a thing called cilia. Like if you put a drop of something, you put your finger in your nose. Let's say you have a little bit of medicine on your finger, and you put it right in your nose, and as soon as you hit anything that's wet, you have cilia in your nose, and what your cilia constantly do, there are these little hairs that beat, and there's a little mucus layer. It's called the ciliated escalator. It's mucociliated escalator is what it's called. So if you can put something in your nose right here, it won't be long until that cilia push it all the way down, and all of a sudden it's in the back of your throat, and then you go. You either cough or you'll like that, and you'll swallow that, and that'll be destroyed in your stomach. Whatever whatever your cilia is pushing. But you also have that in your lungs. Same thing's happening in your lungs. If you didn't have that, in a year's time, your lungs would fill up with dust, and just from simple health dust in the air, you would die. If you didn't have this cilia and this mucus layer, where these cilia is always constantly pushing on this mucus layer, always pushing that stuff out. You would just breathe in simple dust. Like in the sunlight, you can see dust, right? If a sunbeam's coming in, you see that dust in the air that you can't see it unless there's a sunbeam. Well, just from breathing that stuff in, probably like in a years or two time, you would die because your lungs would fill up with dust and you would die. So, with all this said, when you get that inflammation, your that's why you get a runny nose, because it runs out of your nose too, from the inflammation of the tissues, body's trying to wash it away. So that's the main mode of transmission. And the mode of transmission is when 80% of people get this virus, they're going to manifest as a simple cold. Now, there's people's trying to say that it was like a dry cough. That's ridiculous. And that's only if it maybe gets down in your lungs. It's already penetrated your lungs. But if it manifests as a cold, it's not going to be a dry cough. Anything that's a virus or bacteria causes inflammation. You're going to have a runny nose. It's going to be just like a cold. So this lie out here saying that, it manifests as a dry cough, bullshit. It might manifest as a dry cough if you get it down in your lungs, and then you get a fever because the infection is building in your lungs, and it's spread all over your lungs. But and then 80% of people is probably going to manifest just like a cold. And that's why it's so infectious. Those are the spreaders. Those are the people, little typhoid Marys that just have the simple cold, that are the spreaders. All they have is a simple cold. Their nose is running. And what are they doing? Well, they're taking a tissue like this. They're blowing their nose on it. And they're sticking it back in their pocket. And this tissue, the body's trying to wash away. There's millions and millions of viruses on this tissue, and they're touching their hands on it. So then this is how it actually spreads. This is why it's so contagious. Everybody can wear a mask, and people still don't get it. It's not going to stop it. I'd say about 20%. I'd say mass probably 20% might stop it, and that's just from people that are walking around actually coughing and sneezing. Which, that's not the main component of how you catch this. The main component is from people that are wiping their nose, touching their hands, and then they touch common surfaces. They're touching all kinds of common surfaces: keyboards, doorknobs, money. They're touching steering wheels of car. They're touching door handles. They're going over touching a door handle. The person that just manifests as a cold, he's touching a door handle. All these. There's at least 150 things that everyone's touching every day. From the faucet, you go to wash, or even if you wash your hands at a sink, you're touching the handle that somebody who had the cold virus. They touched the handle of a faucet to wash their hands. So you could go, I'm going to go wash my hands and keep myself from getting the virus. And you touch the faucet when you shut it off at the end. That's the main mode of transmission. The hundreds of things that we commonly touch every day. I remember one time, this is contagious just like a cold virus. Same type of contagious. That's why it's spreading. That's why it spreads so easy. So cold virus. I remember one time I went to a vet. And I thought I was at a vet, and I was like, "Oh shit! The receptionist has a cold." And I'm like, I was a respiratory therapist, and I know how contagious all this crap is. I worked in the medical field for 20 years, and I wore a mask. I did everything, but you can't stop it because all it takes is one stupid person spreading the virus, doing something stupid. With their hands. So that's why it spreads in the hospitals, even though everybody's masked and gowned up and all that crap. All it takes is one person with their hands doing something stupid. That's why it's spreading. So I remember when I go to the vet and I seen this chick on, and she's got the cold virus, and she's wiping her nose. She's got a tissue, and she's like, just wiping all that snot, putting thousands or millions and millions of viruses on it, and she's touching it with her little paws. She hands me my Vetville paper, and that's all she touched. She wasn't coughing, she wasn't sneezing, and I touched that paper, and damn if I didn't get that cold. That's how it's transmitted. And then you, not thinking about it, everybody sticks their finger in their nose. People say they don't pick their nose. Well, yeah, really? Or you eat something, you go home, you touch something, touch some food, you eat it. There's only two main portals of entry. It's your mouth and your nose. You touch your nose, like I said, those mucus cilia escalators are going to move that virus back, and that virus is going to try to grab a hold someplace. Because the mucus is, anything you put in your nose, the cilia is going to move that virus back. It's going to stick someplace. Virus is going to grab a hold someplace as it goes through those nasal, as it goes through the nasal mucus area, as it pulls back in your nose. It's going to stick either in your nasal pharynx or your oral pharynx back here on you. That's why you get a sore throat, right up in here. It's just trying to drain, but it starts manifesting in your nose, and then it drains back and ends up right back here in the throat. In that little area where you can't quite swallow, and you get a sore throat. In that area where you don't have a mucociliary escalator and your tissues there. So that's the main component of how this stuff spreads. And this now mask is going to help. If there's someone who's actually out there coughing and sneezing, hell yes, you want your mask. You want your mask on. But I do not believe. I mean, I'm not saying you can't catch it from the aerosolized and stuff like that. I'm not saying, I'd say 20-30% chance you'll catch it that way, but the main mode of transmission is your hands. Of all the hundreds of common things that people touch. So that's why you want people who are even exhibiting simple cold symptoms to stay home. They're the carriers. 80% of the people are typhoid Marys carrying this stuff with a runny nose, touching all kinds of shit that everybody else is touching. So when I hear someone sitting here talking about this mask stuff that's never worked in the medical field, that doesn't know anything about how this stuff really works, it annoys me. It annoys me. What annoys me even more is this past summer, two people, this black couple goes over to, I forget, it was the islands, and they died mysteriously from this thing called, even the FBI tried to say that these people that died over, I forget exactly where the islands were, but they were on vacation, this black couple. And the FBI tried to say that they died of natural causes. That was bullcrap. They didn't die of natural causes. As a respiratory therapist, they died of a thing called ARDS. It's called Adult Respiratory Distress Syndrome. Now, Adult Respiratory Distress Syndrome is caused by many different things. It's basically, the bottom line of what it does is it causes inflammation in your lungs. They call it pulmonary edema, basically, where your lungs, just become swollen, just like I said, the nose, when you get inflammation, where your lungs, all the tissues just become swollen, and of course, your breathing, your lungs aren't made to be wet. If they're wet, then first of all, they can't expand like they need to. Then if they're wet, oxygen and carbon dioxide oxygen has to cross through your lungs. Can't cross as easy. And then if the tissues become inflamed, that makes the tissues thicker, and then oxygen can't cross. You breathe in, Oxygen's got to cross. It's very thin layers in your lung. That's why when I see people like Joey Diaz and Joe Rogan smoking, you're damaging those very thin tissues. Do you understand that those tissues in your lung have to be so thin, paper, thin, that oxygen has to cross through that tissue. And it's got to cross through that tissue to get it in your bloodstream. You have blood going past on this side, you have tissue on this side, and you have oxygen on this side. So carbon dioxide's got to cross through that thin tissue, and oxygen's got to cross the other direction. And so anyway, continuing the story, that's why when I see people smoking, and slowly damaging those tissues, finally those tissues get scarish tissues and destroyed, and they get a thing called emphysema, where the tissues are just destroyed, from years and years of smoking, putting something in there that just degrades those tissues, breaks it down, tears it up, and then all of a sudden, and you don't know that you can't breathe until you're at the 20-yard line. I think the surface area of the lungs is like a football field, I think, if I remember right. So you don't realize that you're in distress until you've destroyed, until you're down to like the 20-yard line of the football field, the surface area that you've destroyed in your lungs. So anyway, going back to the story of these people that were over on these islands. What happened is ARDS can be caused, the inflammation of the lungs can be caused by, I did a case study when I was in school studying, one person just inhaled, an oven blew up in their face and they inhaled the hot air. And of course, when you burn yourself, you're going to get inflammation, and same thing. So she inhaled all this hot air and her lungs got ARDS, inflammation throughout the lungs. And so she, you got to be put on a ventilator, of course. And they're trying with the pressure of the ventilator. They're trying to force. They can dial up oxygen. Room air oxygen is at 21%. They can dial it up all the way to almost 100% oxygen. Room air is just 21%. So they put you on a ventilator and they can cause pressure to try to. They can force a breath in you because you lose the ability to really breathe for yourself. So they put you on a ventilator rate, and then the rate and then they put another thing on there called PEEP. It's called positive end expiratory pressure. So when you actually exhale, it causes a back pressure, which causes more pressure. So, and then they do another fancy thing nowadays, which I never ever did. Is they call it pressure control ventilation, where they actually put more pressure in lungs. Of course, with the danger of that, you might pop a lung if you put too much pressure in there, because lungs will pop. So that's the danger of causing more pressure by using this thing called pressure control, where they control the pressure in the lungs. But anyway, so these people, what happened to these people over in the islands, many different things can cause inflammation of the lungs, which is just throughout inflammation, which causes the lungs to have pulmonary edema, which just means the lungs are inflamed, and wet, but you don't want your lungs wet. Most people get pulmonary edema from congestive heart failure. The fluid backs up. Congestive heart failure means your heart, is like this. Then all of a sudden your heart just becomes fat because it doesn't work as a pump anymore. So what happens is the pump just kind of like gets fat because it can't pump, and it's like this. It's like a big fat man, trying to pump blood, and it's not really pumping any blood because the heart, let's say you had a myocardial infarction, which is just a heart attack, and you have death of tissue in the heart. So then that area of your heart doesn't work. So then the pressure, the blood, it's not pumping the blood it's supposed to. Then the heart has like a fat effect, and it just can't pump. Young heart is pumping away. Congestive heart failure with death of tissue on the heart, big fat thing, and it's just trying to pump. It's just not pumping. So what happens is that fluid backs up. You just have a backup of fluid, And well, where's the first place it's going back up? In your lungs, because remember the tissues are thin. Remember I said the tissues are thin in your lungs? So like it does back up in their tissues in their hand. You'll see their hands and their feet swell. But the lungs, you got a thin tissue in there. So that thin tissue, that's an easy place for it to back up because the tissue's already thin in the first place. So fluid's going to cross the other direction, and then you get pulmonary edema. Lungs are like, all wet and everything. And then another worse thing happens is it leaks into a thing called the pleural space, and that's space in between the lung and the chest wall, which is a potential space. It's usually not a space, but it's a potential space. But then it becomes a space when that fluid leaks in there. And then you can get a liter of fluid pushing down on your lungs that's in that space in between your lungs and the chest wall. So then you get my mom, when before she died, she had a liter of fluid in that potential space on both sides of her lung. They took out 1,000 cc's of fluid out of her lungs. So anyway, going back to what happened to these people over in the islands, these people in the islands. I think they had some central air conditioners outside of the hotel room these people were staying, and they sprayed some sort of herbicide. And I looked up the herbicide, and damn if the herbicide wasn't one of the things that called ARDS. So they breathed in this stuff. They probably kind of smelled a little bit in the air as it got sucked in their ventilation system in their hotel rooms over in the islands or wherever they were. And they went to sleep at night, and they sprayed that stuff outside their thing, and saturated it was probably some sort of cheap herbicide or whatever it was they sprayed. I forget exactly what it is. I looked it up. But I forgot exactly what it was. But when I looked it up, it did cause ARDS, adult respiratory distress syndrome. So which is just inflammation in the lungs, which can be caused by many different things. Hot air. It can be caused by even viruses. If viruses totally penetrate the lungs throughout, you can get an inflammatory response with that. You can get inflammatory response from blood transfusions. There's something they put in blood. I forget exactly what it was, but it can cause. Let's say you had to have a bunch of blood. You got in an automobile accident. You had a bunch of blood transfusions. They gave you too much blood. That can cause an irritation in the lungs and cause that inflammation also. At the moment I can't remember all the different things that can cause it. But I looked up the herbicide, and one of the things it can do is it can cause ARDS, which is adult respiratory distress syndrome, which is that pulmonary damaged lung. So this couple went to bed, breathing that stuff in, and all of a sudden they woke up and they couldn't breathe because their lungs were inflamed. And then the FBI tried to say they died of natural causes. And it happened to another couple, I think, that went over there. And I was amazed that the FBI didn't see this. It was so easy. It was so easy to see. But if you know anything about ARDS, as soon as you hear that these people's lungs had pulmonary edema, I mean, you know that as a respiratory therapist. But anyway, I was listening to this guy. I don't even know who this guy is. I think I've listened to him once. Who is he? Oh, he's working on artificial intelligence, so I guess he thinks he knows about medical stuff. Well, I know quite a bit about the mind, too. That's one of the books. I got about 2 books. I've never studied the mind, but I know a lot about the mind also. That's my other expertise. And I've been studying that for about 8 years on my own research. So, but I'd like to listen to what he has to say on that. But I've been studying the mind, and I think I'm ahead of most people on that, as far as how the mind works. It's very simple once you figure out the secrets of how it works. I'm actually writing a book, which is The Secret of Everything, of how the mind works. Now, as far as mastering it, I haven't. I know about it. I need to write my book so I can figure out how to master the mind perfectly. But I can teach anyone how to master their mind. I honestly do need to write my book first because I've recorded in the last 8 years probably about 3 or 4 thousand hours of information on how I see how the mind works. But I haven't had a chance to review any of that stuff, and I forgot a lot of it. But I'm constantly trying to figure out how to make my mind work better. The main thing I see about the mind is that everybody lives in an individual matrix based on what you, as far as your character, your character is what was downloaded into when you were about 2 years old, 3 years old. Just like your language is downloaded into your ability to view the world and see the world is based on your character of what was downloaded into you. And that's how, just like you relate with people with language, you relate with people based on how you see the world. That's why everyone doesn't see things the same. But I know some other secrets which I'm not going to reveal here. There's one I'm tempted to reveal, but I don't want to reveal it. It's a powerful, powerful concept. But basically, just to generalize, without giving away too many secrets, basically to generalize, the mind, everyone lives in their own matrix. Like I've heard Joe, I watched one of Joe's videos once, and I don't watch too many videos, but I watched one video where Joe was talking about, make yourself the character and then become that character. Which goes back to some of the stuff that I've been thinking on of the bottom line is you are the author of your life, right? Who writes the story, right? Every day you write a story, right? But the saying that's said is, one of the greatest presidents we ever had who figured out, how the mind works and helped a lot of people who never figured out how the mind works, who a lot of people never do. He said, men are not prisoners of fate, but prisoners of their own mind. And see, that goes back to now he didn't explain that to people so that people can understand that, and that's the kind of stuff I'm going to do, because it's not very complicated once you break it all down on exactly how it all works. I'm just going to generalize about how it works without giving away any big secrets, but basically, everyone lives in their own matrix of how they view the world. And it's a beautiful thing when I see people agree, like on Joe Rogan, since people do have healthy self-esteems, and that's one of the big keys. Like even people like Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about how that all these super intelligent people can't agree. And they should, if they actually have real intelligence, right? So you can have intelligence, see you can actually have intelligence and be highly intelligent but yet not agree, which goes back to another principle, which has to do with self-esteem. And I don't want to get too deep on this, but basically they're living in a distorted matrix, and that's the reason why they can't agree. Because they're actually in a distorted matrix. Otherwise, they would be able to agree. And I don't want to explain the details on exactly how this works, but it's very simple. But that's the biggest problem. One of the biggest problems we have as humanity is this problem. And it really has a lot to do with I'll explain it. I'll explain it this much. It has to do with your self-image, how you view your own self. And there's a secret behind that that explains why that works, but I don't want to reveal that secret either. But there's a secret principle. There's always an E equals MC square of how something works. If you dig deep enough to the foundation of truth, because all of truth starts at a foundation, right? Just like they're trying to build the Hadron Collider, they're trying to found the foundation of what? Truth, of reality, right? So when it comes to the mental realm, and I hate giving away these secrets because other people's going to steal my ideology, because this is how all things work, not just physical things, but mental things. And I hate to even give away this secret, but that's the kind of stuff that I do. Is I break down the mental realm, just like with the Hadron Collider, they're breaking down the finding the smallest particles so that they understand how reality works. Because if you can understand that, then you understand what space-time is, right? Because as you get down on the quantum level, you see that you almost get a glimpse of time itself, of how time itself is made. Like on a quantum level, you'll see, and I don't study any of this stuff. I just looked at it, and it just makes perfect sense to me, since once you get down on that quantum level, you're actually getting a glimpse of what time is, because it's space-time, right? So that's one thing. I don't know if I'm sure scientists that are intelligent enough would realize that you're actually on the quantum level starting to see what the fabric of time is, right? And how things operate in those spaces, in space, right? But what they also need to keep in mind when they get down on that quantum level is time. They're getting a glimpse of what time is. We had great scientists like Newton, who figured out that there's a thing called gravity, and then he took that beyond gravity. He started looking at gravity and getting to know it, right? And how do they know? What's very interesting is about physical things is they get to know things by what? By what? Their behavior. Behavior. They behave a certain way, right? That's how they know it. So time, if you want to really, I don't know if Einstein really thought too much about it all. As far as what time is, I don't know. I've never listened to any videos. I'd be curious to see if he actually tried to figure out what time itself was. He seemed to dig into what time was more than anyone else. But somebody just posted something, Sid Roth. But that's how you have to understand things to know what they are, right? Does anybody say that they really know what time is? But I really believe that once you get on the quantum level, you're getting a glimpse of time. You're seeing time, which is wild. And I wish I had time to think about all this stuff. I barely even scratched the surface of thinking about any of this stuff. I never studied anything in school because I had something called attention deficit disorder. And people that don't think that real, boy, they don't have a clue of how the mind works if they don't think that's real. Because everybody lives in I don't want to get into all this. This stuff's deep. But it's so simple once you figure it out. Everything's so simple. But then to master the simple is where I'm just beginning to launch into. Because I think I can teach anyone how to master their mind with simple principles, but I don't have time, to do all this stuff. I've only just started. Just got curious about 10 years ago about the mind. And, but this is a frontier, just like Columbus, explored the New World. There isn't anything more interesting to explore than the mind. and how it works. And that's kind of what this guy's doing here with this artificial intelligence. You can't create artificial intelligence if you don't understand how the mind works, right? So I guess this guy thinks he's intelligent, can speak on mask, on how this virus works, because he understands one thing, but he obviously hasn't studied very much about, viruses and how they work. But he's speaking on, saying that masks protect everybody. But I'm venturing into his frontier, and I really didn't even give a crap about the stuff I studied. I just studied it because I had to. I got a 4.0, even though I had attention deficit disorder. It was pure hell for me to be able to get my mind to focus, and I didn't even know I had it back then. But the battle of me having that is what got me curious about the mind in the first place. And it goes into deep spiritual things, which you guys have no clues about. Like 40 years ago, I had this dream/vision, and didn't know anything about Bible stuff. I didn't know there was things called dreams/visions. And so 40 years ago, I had a dream/vision which actually dealt with the mind, and I had no clue. But I don't want to give away the secrets of it. But anyway, after I had that dream/vision, then I got hit by 2 electric shocks. And then that was the revelation of God helping me with this thing that people call ADD, but it's bigger than that. That's like the tip of the iceberg of what. Once you understand that, then you can understand how the mind works. The mind seems simple to me, but like I said, I haven't even begun to even scratch the surface. Got 23 weeks before I can have enough money to retire, and by 4th of July, I can have $3,000 saved. I can start working on these books and really venture into all this stuff. I mean, there's so much stuff I'd like to venture into. I mean, sometimes it takes people a while to wake up. Like, all I cared about when I was younger was sports, and I wanted to be a tennis pro and all this stuff. But now I have a thirst for knowledge and understanding every and anything. And it's just, it's almost like for some people, you should just go out and get a freaking job and work until your mind becomes thirsty. I mean, it took me to be I'll be 62 years old here. It took me that long to become thirsty for information. And I know people don't know much about the Bible, but people used to live 1,000 years. And there's so many interesting things. The Bible is such a mysterious, so many hidden mysteries in that book. Just like God hides things in nature. What people don't understand, like in nature, if you can understand how a creature works and how this creature protects itself by its DNA, it's a programming that helps it. Some creatures can manifest a bug on their back, or a bug on their tongue or whatever, so that other creatures see that and then they eat the creature because it looks like a bug on their tongue. Or I mean, all these manifestations, that doesn't come from their intelligence, right? They didn't think about. It came from a higher intelligence of their DNA, right? A programming. And of course, God is in the Bible 4,444 times. And the word God itself has 4 letters. And of course, God is in the King James Version Bible 4,444 times. And of course, God's real name has 4 letters, not 3. G-O-D is not God's name. It's in Hebrew, it's 4 letters. And the Word, which the Bible says everything that was made, and scientists know that everything's information or a word. Like if you see a black hole, I hear some people say it's like a laser disc. This stores information. Everything is about information. Everything that they do on the Hadron Collider is about bits of information. Everything is information. So when it says in the Bible, anything that was made by the Word, it's really talking about information. And what is word? It's a 4-letter word. And who is a word? Jesus. And it says Jesus is the Word. And it says without the Word, nothing that was made without the Word. And now we know. Now we're looking at someone who's I didn't even know. I just started listening. I didn't even know this guy was going to talk about artificial intelligence. All intelligence is a word, but what is it? What is it really? It's a thing called consciousness. And what is consciousness? A living word. Consciousness is a living word. It's not just a word, it's a living word. Because a computer can store information, but it's not alive, right? So we have the viruses, which they say they're not really sure if they're alive or dead. But we have this thing called DNA, which is all these creatures, which, like I said, God is in the Bible 4,444 times. DNA has 4 letters. Every creature has DNA, that's alive, considered alive, which, and Jesus, who's the Word, was 4 letters. Jesus, who's the King, is 4 letters. The closest disciple to Jesus, which was John, 4 letters, who wrote the 4th gospel. A cross has 4 points. I mean, look at God signing his name on all this stuff. And I just happen to also believe in time. I've shared videos about that. 40 years ago, I had a revelation of time, where God slowed down time. So it took me 40 years to figure out what that was all about. I was with a friend in a car, and time slowed down. And when time slowed down, the first time I prayed and it happened, and all you're doing is opening up a portal to another dimension. And what is it? What is that dimension? It's a dimension, of course, that doesn't have time. Because everything that's in time passes on or passes away. It's moving. It's changing, movement, change. But in this other realm, which everybody's had all these near-death experiences, I've heard it over and over and over again, that there's the first thing they realize is, this place isn't a dimension of time. And of course, by Albert Einstein, he said, well, this is a place of space and what? Time. So I had a revelation one time 40 years ago, and I was praying. I felt time slow down. I thought, well, maybe this is what you feel when you pray. So the confirmation that it wasn't just that, as I was praying, very powerfully connected with God, because I was pure back then, very pure Christian. I'm trying to get back to that point again. And opened up a portal. As I was I was in a car. A guy was driving with me. He was driving the car. I was in the passenger seat. Getting kind of tired here. I was in the passenger seat, and I started praying, and that time portal opened up. And mind you, I've never taken a drug in my life. Worked in the medical field, life and death situations. Not saying that I was the most mentally sound person, because I did have ADD. Still battling it. Still trying to master it, just like Buddha's trying to master the mind. Buddha, last dying breath was master the mind. Well, that's what I'm trying to do. And the Bible's very clear on that information on exactly how to do that. Very clear. And that's where I got a lot of secrets from. There's tons of secrets in the Bible, tons of secrets on the mind. There's just tons of secrets there. And I don't want to share them here. But, I can kind of, I don't know. I don't want to get, I can just talk so much into this stuff. Oh, getting a headache just But I don't got a thing called time right now. But anyway, let's see how long I've recorded this. I got to get it moving. I only got 2 days off from work, and my job is a murderer job right now. I'm almost into an hour. I don't want to do any longer than an hour. But my job is a killer job right now. It's kind of like a job Joe Rogan had that he quit right off the bat. This is 1,000 times worse than that job. But like I said, I wasn't like Joe. I didn't become self-aware, you know. The biggest thing they're worried about these computers is becoming what? Self-aware. And then saying, well, we don't need you humans. Well, it took me 40 years because of my ADD to become self-aware, and I'm just now emerging. And that's exactly what happened to Albert Einstein. He had this powerful daydreaming type brain, which is very similar to the ADD. I don't want to explain exactly how it works because it's so simple. I'm amazed that people don't understand how it all works. Let me throw this one little truth out there, since you guys don't understand how the mind works. This'll blow your mind, this thought. And I really was saving this one for a book. Well, maybe I shouldn't say this one. Oh, I hate to even say it. People steal this information. Yeah, I'm not going to say it. It's too big. It's too much of a mind breakthrough. Yeah, I'm not going to say it. Man, I want to. Because it's an amazing thought. It's so amazing. I'll just say it's about the Vista killer. I figured him out on a mental realm. You know how people are trying to figure out serial killers like Jeffrey Dahmer and different things? Who did what? Ate his victims. Do you see the similarity where Jesus said he eat me? You know, why did he say to eat me? There's a secret there, and I'm not going to even reveal that secret. I guess I could reveal that secret. Why not? Remember he said, eat me? What is Jesus? He's a word, right? He's a word. But he's not just a word, he's a living word. Anyway, I don't want to share too many secrets. So what in the world was I even talking about? I forgot what I was even talking about. Now I'm tired. I was talking about consciousness. But I'm just now starting. I'm talking about myself. I'm just now starting to emerge into. And I know it sounds stupid to you, but you know, artificial intelligence finally became self-aware. Well, I'm just now becoming self-aware. Now Joe Rogan did that. Now, let me explain how Joe Rogan worked on a psychological level. Joe Rogan was not self-aware. He's what's called an introvert, and you can say that's, and he could have stayed like that, and been a totally different life and a totally different person. But he broke free. He got lucky, and he broke free of that and became self-aware, and that was one of the secrets of Joe's success. Which I don't know if even Joe knows that. Now, let me explain another thing. Oprah's secret of her success was also self-awareness. How did Oprah become self-aware? And that's what we're talking about here, is artificial intelligence and the danger of artificial intelligence becoming self-aware. But the secret of humans, and Joe had a podcast on not too long ago where he said he's seen a homeless person, you know, and they were homeless. And he's like, Joe's like, well, I don't even know how to begin to help that person. Well, I do, Joe. It's simple. They have to become self-aware. And I know this concept is over your head, and I don't want to reveal the secret of it. Man, there's something I want to say on here so bad. Just blow people's minds. Oh, I can't say it. It's too much of a secret. But that's how you change these people, is you get them to become self-aware. And why does that work? Man, I'm giving away too much information here. But anyway, we'll talk about Joe Rogan. Joe became self-aware. And that's when Joe started to become successful. Now, he was still a hothead. Like, I've heard him talk about, and he wanted to kill, not kill, but, what was that, the guy's name? That comedian, I should know his name, that got into drugs and crap, that was on a show with him. The blonde guy that was on, I can't think of his name, was on Star Trek episode once. But Joe was like really pissed at this guy because the guy was out of control. The guy was intelligent, but it was intelligence that was out of control, right? And some people can be like, have intelligence, but they're out of control, like a Hannibal Lecter type. But this guy's not really I don't think a Hannibal Lecter type. I haven't really tried to think about him on a psychological level. But Joe became aware, and that's when he started to become successful. And if you see anybody who's successful at anything, you're going to see that self-awareness, because then they have the ability to control their life and to write their own story. And I've battled chronic fatigue. You know, Joe talked about this chick that had all these allergies. Oh, my brain's just dead right now. But the chick that had all the allergies, I'm sorry, I'm just too tired right now I know her name, and I don't even feel like looking it up. That had all the food allergies and had to do nothing but eat meat. And I know her name, but I'm too tired to think of it. I woke up so tired today from getting hammered at work for 5 days. I mean, I just got hammered. And I woke up today like just in total beat up and exhausted. I felt a little bit better right now, but anyway, what Joe doesn't understand is ADD is one of the first manifestation of leaky gut. And Joe doesn't understand that leaky gut is what causes the arthritis. And it causes all kinds of problems in people from because see what happens, most of your immune system has to be in your gut, because your gut, you got this huge army of bacteria that's in your gut that wants to cross into what? Just like in the lungs, the bloodstream, right? It's got to cross into the bloodstream, just like in the lungs, the air has to cross into the bloodstream. Well, you got all this bacteria in your gut, more bacteria than you got cells in your body, which what is like 40 trillion cells. So you got this army that you don't want in your bloodstream, but the food has to get in your bloodstream. So you got this huge amount of the immune system in your gut that has to stop. It doesn't have that bacteria. You don't want the bacteria that's in your gut that you need in your gut that does things that they can't even begin to understand yet. I mean, they're going to find discoveries about this bacteria. They're even going to find discoveries that this bacteria even controls you as far as on a mental level. Then why wouldn't it? It has what? DNA. It can speak. Just like that frog, that gets like a bug on the end of its tongue to attract things to eat other things. I think there's a frog that does that, but you know how animals come up with all these things. Well, you think the bacteria don't speak just because they have DNA? And some of these things have more DNA than we do. Doesn't corn have more DNA than we do? And you think this stuff doesn't all communicate with everything? How do you think all this works? How do you think this ecosystem in the world, everything seems to work? It's all communicating in on ways in which you don't have a clue. How do you think the 40 trillion cells in your body, each one of those things are an individual communicator, and in each cell there's millions of little communications going on, in billions and trillions maybe of communication going on in that cell. Then if you drop it down to the atomic level, look at all the communications that are going on in there. Then you got this thing called free radicals that try to steal electrons from other things that cause cancer. And that's a form of stealing in communication. And so you got all this communication going on, which everything is speaking. And you think that the bacteria that's in your gut that has more DNA, you think it's not communicating, infecting you on a mental level? It's communicating. You just don't know it's communicating. It's trying to impose its will, just like the yeast that get in your gut. Yeast, overgrowth of yeast in your gut controls your brain, makes you have cravings for sugar. Because it wants you to eat more. But as soon as you stop, you lose that craving. So it's trying to control you. And you got all these fat Americans, walking around, eating this food, being controlled by this yeast in their gut. And then you put antibiotics in there, and you kill the good bacteria. And then the yeast are like, well, looks like we get to take more ground here in the gut, because they just killed off a bunch of bacteria taking this antibiotic. So we're just going to take over. And then and we're in Passover right now. God doesn't know anything, even though God's in the Bible 4,444 times and created DNA. God don't know nothing. But what are the Jews doing right now, stupids? They're doing a thing called eating what? This thing called unleavened bread. That means bread without yeast. And you're saying God doesn't know how it all works? Really? They're spending a week where they're not eating any yeast to reset themselves, and you're saying God don't know anything? Really? No. Really? You're the one that's dumb. You think God's dumb, but He knows everything. He made everything. He made this dimension of space and time. He knows everything. Everything. Plus, plus, don't you understand? He's not living in space and time. He's outside of space and time. That's how He can answer every single prayer. He's got all the time in the world. Time is moving down here, but He's not. He's just sitting there when someone prays. He's just sitting there, and prayer comes up. He hears it. One at a time, just taking his good old time, because He doesn't live in time, silly. He made it. He made time. Oh, brother, it's amazing how intelligent people get. A little bit of intelligence. I hear Joe always talking about this evolutionary man was this there and did this, and what he doesn't understand is there were two sets of man that were created. There was one made in time to keep the earth. There was another set that were not in time. But then when they sinned, they merged. They jumped from the kingdom of God, which doesn't have time. They were connected to the kingdom. As soon as they sinned, then they entered into time, and they merged, and the two joined. So what does God do with the Jewish nation? He says, the first thing He says to Abraham is, separate yourself. They were separated in the beginning. Adam and Eve did not have children. They were like the what? Angels. They didn't have any children until what? They slipped into time. And what were they? Why did God create two? Well, He had a backup plan. One set was keeping the earth. The other set was keeping the garden. I mean, it's so simple. Once you have this time revelation that I had 40 years ago, I mean, none of this. I mean, I could go on I could write 50,000 books. I'm just barely scratching a little bit of information here. But I don't think there's even any Christians out there that even know about this time thing. I've tried to tell some of them, but of course no one's listening to me. There is one called Tony Kemp that you can find on Sid Roth. He went up to heaven because he drawed near to God, and that's very common. I mean, once you get born again and you have the ability to speak to God and connect with God. Otherwise, you don't, and you don't. Jesus said, "Let the dead bury the dead." Well, the people that are dead, the people that are not born again, not spiritually alive, doesn't know anything about any of this stuff. But this stuff is going on. It's happening. It's real. Even though you stuck your head in the sand, you've never really investigated it. Sid Roth, on the other hand, has investigated 40 years, 40 years of all of these supernatural experiences that, oh, Joe Rogan doesn't believe is true. Well, I've had supernatural experiences myself, and I've had similar ones to these people, and I don't know these people. My first experience at 14 years old. Anyway, I don't got time to get into all this stuff. Anyway, I gotta quit. Yeah, I gotta quit. What time is it? I put in an hour. But yeah, I'm gonna stop the video. That's all the time I got to blow. I gotta work. This is my day off. I can't waste it. Anyway, let me stop this.